Welcome to the Yiboneh Beit Midrash. Welcome home to Torah. A warm welcome, a really warm welcome to everyone that's here presently and online watching this at any given time. Tonight's class will be broken into two segments. One, and I really want to speak about Shavuot, the upcoming holiday. So let's start with Adam, for example. Adam lived how many years? 930 years, but he was supposed to live 1,000 or more. So 1,000 years, Chazal tell us that 70 years of his life he gave. To whom? He gave to Dovid. And how long did Dovid live? He lived 70 years. He was born and he died on his birthday. Oh, he died on his birthday as well. Not just born on his birthday, for anybody that got that. I know you did, Larry. But he also died on his birthday. And what was that? Shavuot. So this is part of the reason I want to dedicate this learning to this figure. I don't even have the words, but when you hear tonight's lecture, you'll have a much greater appreciation for what King David, who his personality, who he was, who he is, still is, and what the Moshiach will represent as well. So I mentioned that Adam Harishon, Adam the first man, he lived 930. Then David was 70. The letters, Adam himself, like in other words, the whole blueprint of who Adam is Adam Harishon for the A or the Aleph, Daled, the D, is for David, and the M, the Mem at the end, is for Moshiach. So the whole blueprint of mankind is from Adam, which is the soul, that special soul. And then it became into David, and then it's into Moshiach. But really, truth be told, it's the same soul that Moshe had. Moshe was the Mashiach. Okay, it's the same soul, and every generation, that soul is in this world somewhere. Okay, so just as an appreciation for David, I just want to mention that, see, the Torah doesn't just belong to individuals, right? And it shouldn't be, it's only my Torah, right? The Torah actually belongs to the whole nation of Israel. That's for starters. And more than that, the Jewish people are the heart of the world. So too, David is like the heart. The king represents the heart of the nation. And therefore, whatever he represents is really a message and to be able to relate to every human being. With the intricacies of the relationships, okay, with Lot and his two daughters, Ammon and Moab, and the nations that came from those nations, from those daughters, and then you had Yehuda and Tamar, intricate relationship that we're not going to discuss tonight in depth anyway. And then you had, of course, who else? Ruth and Boaz, which is a very seemingly awkward relationship, right? And David has the most awkward, and that's what I'm going to discuss tonight, this awkward relationship that David actually had with his father Yishai, right? How did David come about? Wait till you hear there's going to be, now, let's start with Psalm 69. Now I only have certain verses that I want to share with you, but this gives you an idea who David HaMelech is, or at least when you hear these verses you're going to say, what? That's David HaMelech? And then we'll go into it a little bit. So, save me, O God, for the waters threaten to engulf me. That's how he felt. I am wearied by my calling out, and my throat is dry. I've lost hope in waiting. If this isn't the Jewish people's predicament for the last 3,300 years, it's unbelievable. The more numerous than the hairs on my head are those who hate me without reason. Right? All the anti-Semitism. This is David, who's the heart of the Jewish people. Must I then repay what I have not stolen? Right? They're asking for us things that we haven't even stolen. Mighty are those who would cut me down, who are my enemies without cause. We have enemies all around us. Oh God, you know my folly, and my unintended wrongs are not hidden from you. Now this is where we pinpoint. It is for your sake that I have borne disgrace, that humiliation covers my face. What was David feeling? What experience in his life caused him to emote this? I had become a stranger to my brothers, an alien to my mother's sons. Crazy. We know this is how David felt. What made him feel this way? Out of envy for your house, they ravaged me. The disgraces of those who revile you have fallen upon me. Right? The Jew, Yisrael, represents God. We're God's ambassadors. Yisra, right? The Sar El. We're God's ambassadors. Those who sit by the gate talk about me. I am taunted by drunkards. Disgrace breaks my heart, and I am left deathly sick. Here's another line that's unbelievable. I hope for solace, but there is none. He's looking for comfort, but there's no comfort. And for someone to comfort me, but I find no one. They put gall in my meal and gave me vinegar to quench my thirst. Okay, these are only certain lines. But we know that King David had a tremendous amount of challenges through his life. Okay, but what made him feel so alone and disgraced? What exactly caused this? So we know that he was born, now just to get this idea, you had Ruth, then you had Oved, then you had Yishai, then you had David, okay? So Yishai sat on the Sanhedrin. He was actually the head of the Sanhedrin. Now David, when he was the king, he also sat on the Sanhedrin. Unbelievable what King David did. When he was in the Sanhedrin, he judged the people. You can see that in 2 Samuel 8:15. But you know, he's the one who decreed that we should make 100 blessings a day. Okay, through his Sanhedrin. They instituted part of Birkat HaMazon that we say every time we eat bread, after we eat bread, the blessings after the meal. The blessings on Jerusalem. Him and Solomon created the third blessing. Another interesting decree, and these are rabbinic decrees, by the way, not being alone with a female. Now, in a secluded area, if you were with a married, like if she was married, that's already decreed in the Torah. You're not allowed to be with her in a secluded area. But a single woman, King David decreed as yichud.
Oh yeah, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's a rabbinic command. In other words, deraisa from the Torah itself. It's forbidden for us to be alone with a woman who's not our wife, who's married. But a single woman is King David in his genius, right? Genius. I think people make fun of Vice President Pence because they shouldn't, but they do. That apparently it was well known in the campaign, before before Trump was even elected, that I guess it was lefties or anti-religious people were making fun that Pence has a policy of always leaving a door open if he's ever in a room with a woman. I don't know. He got it from us, or he's just intuitive. He knows what's good for him, right? Okay, so Yishai was an amazing person, and Yishai was one of only 4 righteous individuals who never sinned, right? I know there's a verse that says
But he caused suffering to David, so how can we say that he didn't sin?
Wait till you hear what suffering he caused to him. He didn't know. What didn't he know? What suffering did he cause to him? Wait till, this is what we're going to talk about tonight. Okay, exactly. You hit the nail on the head. We know that when David was born, as you're mentioning, there's such derision and contempt over his birth, and really, this is what he means when he speaks about this idea that I was a stranger to my brothers, a foreigner to my mother's sons. What was this all about? He wasn't even allowed to eat with his family at the same table. They put him in the corner. You talk about a black sheep? He was the black sheep, all right, whatever that means. So they always sent him out. Go take care of the flocks. They were hoping that a lion would kill him and eat him, and that he always was victorious over all these animals anyway that came to attack him. But there was one person who stood by him the whole time, and that was his mother. Because his mother knew the secret. What secret am I talking about? Her name, first of all, was Nitzevet. Okay, don't forget that. It's a hard name to remember, but it's easy enough because who else has the name Nitzevet? What happened? Let me tell you. This is where this whole idea of Shavuot is a celebration of the oral Torah. Yes, it's true. It's a celebration of receiving the Torah itself. But there is no Torah without the oral Torah. The rest of the nations have the written Torah. They don't have the oral Torah. We received both. It's amazing. And what I'm going to tell you now, everybody, Christians and Muslims, they all know about King David, right? That the Moshiach, the seed of Moshiach is going to come through King David. How? How's that even possible? Do you know that it says in our Torah that a Moabite is not allowed to enter the congregation of the Jewish people? What does that mean? Does that mean they can't convert? Or does that mean if they do convert, they can't marry? It means that they can't marry. If you look in Deuteronomy chapter 23, I think, verses 4 and 5. So, no Ammonite or Moabite shall be admitted into the congregation of the Lord. None of their descendants, even in the 10th generation, shall ever be admitted into the congregation of the Lord. What does that mean? So, believe it or not, as I mentioned to you, King David sat on the Sanhedrin. Yishai, he was the head of the Sanhedrin. Boaz was the head of the Sanhedrin. What does the Sanhedrin do? If you look in chapter 17 of Deuteronomy, whenever there's a doubt, you go to the court, and if the court has a doubt, they go to the higher court until you reach the place that Hashem has chosen. And you have to listen to what the court says. The court has the right to decide whatever they're deciding. There's integrity here. These are the 70 of the most righteous people who are full of wisdom and Ruach HaKodesh, really filled with the Spirit of God, and they're able to use the tools that God gave them to make the determination. This is not called the doctrine of man. This is the doctrine of God. Okay, this is how it's done. And whether or not a Moabite could enter the congregation is no question. It says it black and white. Correct? Well, guess what? Ruth comes, she's a Moabite. Is she not? So there was always a tradition from Moses' time that this was only about the men, not the women. But because of a few reasons. Could be because no Moabite women had ever tried to convert before or in a long time, so it really wasn't an issue and it was forgotten, right? If things aren't happening on a regular basis, so you kind of forget about it. Okay? So it was forgotten. The halacha, the law, the application of the law was somehow forgotten. And they debated it as time went on. The Sanhedrin sometimes said, you know what? I think we made a mistake, and the women may not enter the congregation. And then they made a decision a few generations later. Yes, they can enter into marriage with a Jew if they converted properly. Went back and forth. So Boaz actually poskined, right? His Sanhedrin said they can marry. They can convert and marry into the Jewish nation. And he even proved it, right? Put your money where your mouth is. And he married Ruth, right? Now he died the next day, right? But she became pregnant and we had Oved. Fine. So by the time Yishai comes around, Yishai is now the head of the Sanhedrin. And he himself has doubts. What if Boaz was wrong? What if the base din of Boaz was wrong? They had the right to change it. Well, he didn't change it, but he was afraid. Now this is where things get a little sketchy. What did he do? If he had a doubt, he's considering himself a Jew, right, as a grandson of Ruth, a Moabite. And now he has doubts whether she was allowed to marry Boaz, which makes him puzzle to marry a Jew. So he separated from his lovely wife Nitzevet after 7 children. And he thought, if I'm puzzle, my 7 children are also puzzle. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my handmaid, the female slave of the house, and I'm going to make a condition with her. What's the condition? Listen to this. He says, I'm going to free you on condition. Right? You can free your slave. And she becomes a Jew. But he did it on condition. If I'm really a Jew, because it was permissible for Boaz to marry Ruth, then you're also free as a proper Jew, and whatever child we have will be a kosher Jew. But if it's forbidden for me, let's say I'm blemished, I'm really not allowed to marry a Jew, then you'll remain a shifcha Canaanite, a non-Jewish slave, and you're allowed, a Moabite convert is allowed to marry the shifcha Canaanite. So at least the kid won't be a mamzer, it'll be whatever it is, a status, but not as a Jew. Okay, so what do we have here? He made now, his handmaid told his wife. This is like, come on. Listen, they already weren't sleeping for many years. It's already, she knew his dilemma. And she felt bad for him. And now the handmaid comes and says, your husband wants to sleep with me. He wants to have kosher children. The whole point was, the 7 children you have with you, he's in doubt. How do you think she feels? She feels terrible, right? But she supports her husband. So they made a deal, just like Rachel and Leah, right? Where Rachel was supposed to be with Yaakov, and there were certain signs, and she gave him over to Leah, and Leah was with Yaakov. Remember the first night. So too, if there were signs, she gave him over. So Yishai slept with his wife, not knowing it was his wife. He thought it was his handmaid. And any time that he was supposed to sleep with his handmaid, it was always his wife. He didn't know it. So the question you asked earlier, did Yishai, if he was sin-free, how is it that he gave David such anguish? That's a sin. He had no idea that he actually thought that his wife was with another man. Remember, 3 months later, she's grown pregnant, and he thinks he didn't sleep with her. What would you do? What would Yehuda do to Tamar? You kill her? Your wife who you didn't sleep with is pregnant. It's adultery. You kill her. He carried that. He had Rahmanut. He had such love for his wife, it overshadowed everything. And he remained silent. What about her though? What pain that after this child is born, they put him out to pasture. They don't let him sit at the table and eat. He's the black sheep of the family, because not just Yishai, but all the brothers. Word gets around, even though what you're thinking, right? Somehow everyone knew if Yishai's putting him out to pasture, everybody knew this is an illegitimate son, or thought so. Now you follow what's going on? How David?
How could he not recognize his wife? I mean, did it have a blanket just with a little hole in it, or?
No, chas v'shalom. That's illegal. It was dark. Listen, if she wore a certain perfume, she wore the perfume of the handmaid. It's supposed to be completely dark. Okay? We're not going to talk about this, how it happened, but trust me, this is how it happened, okay?
This was before electricity.
Okay, it was before electricity. If you want to say that, that's fine too. We're not referring to that point.
There's no light from the moon.
There you go. So this whole idea, I told you, we're celebrating the oral Torah because what are we celebrating? King David, kosher. He's kosher. There's no blemish, right? And he suffered all the way through. And his mother told him the truth. What? That you're mine, meaning from your Yishai, not from somebody else. And yet they all remained silent. 28 years until Samuel the prophet comes. Right? You know the whole story. Samuel comes to anoint a king from Yishai's sons. And the story is unbelievable. Where do we have the, here's the, at last Samuel said to Yishai, after looking at all the other children and deciding, yes, no, maybe, no. You can look at 1 Samuel chapter 16, verses 6 through 12. So Samuel says to Yishai, but after the 7 kids, he already puzzled. He already said, none of them are the king. Are there no lads remaining? He answered, a small one is left. He's taking care of the sheep. So Samuel says to him, send for him and have him brought. We will not stir until he comes. So he sent for him and had him brought. He was of ruddy complexion, with red hair, beautiful eyes, and handsome to look at. God said, meaning through Samuel, rise up, anoint him. Moshiach, anoint him, for this is the one. So we have a much better idea now of the anguish. When we read Psalm 69, that was only a window, a small window, into all the other Psalms. David is being chased by his enemies. What he felt for the first 28 years of his life in his relationship with his father, and the love and care and warmth that he felt, the empathy of his mother, because she also went through a tremendous pain, just as he did. So what I wanted to get across in this little lesson was the tremendous value that we have for the oral Torah, and the non-Jews who all believe in some kind of messianic figure coming through David. Hello, you must accept that we have a valid oral Torah. We know we do. We don't have to fight. We don't have to prove to anybody anything. But many of the Gentiles fight with us, right? And say, oh, we all have the Torah. The Torah is for all of us. And you know what? The truth is that the written Torah, what God wants you to know, is for you, for the Gentiles as well. But what the real meaning behind every single word and every single nuance, you can only find through us. We were there. We're the witnesses. We stood at Mount Sinai. And this is Shavuot. Shavuot is not just about accepting the written Torah. It's really about the acceptance, whether it was forced on us or not. Okay? Let's just say it was forced on us. The Jews didn't have much of a choice. We had to accept it. Help us in our mission. Don't work against us. Okay? Work with us. We actually have a tradition of what the Bible means. Okay? So you can team up with us, right? Or you can drop off the face of the planet for all I care, right? but we have a mission, and it would be nice if you joined us in the mission of supporting us in letting the world know. I give classes on 7 Noahide laws, right? On on what it means to be a Noahide, and I will put a link down below that you could check that series out. But for the Jews out there, this is our holy, the rich heritage that we have. And if you dedicate yourself this Shavuos, right, to learning more about your own heritage and dedicating yourself to learning Torah, I would suggest for the non-Jews to dedicate themselves to learning the parts of the Torah that is shayach, or relates to them, okay, which is a vast amount, unbelievable amount. But that if we all be open to accepting the Torah, and I think this, I've spoken about this before, the word for Keter Torah, which is now going to be the next lesson, Keter Torah is the crown of Torah. The crown is not placed in the right place, right? The corona is not in its right place. We need to put the corona in the right place. 620 letters, the word Keter is 620. Kaf, 20. Taf is 400. Resh, 200. 620 letters. Represents the 613 mitzvahs for the Jew and the 7 mitzvahs for the Noahide. If we all accept the Keter of Torah as the most important thing, right? Putting it back in its right place, I'm going to just bless you, and I'm going to guarantee you, you'll have life in the world to come. That's all I can guarantee you. I can't guarantee you anything else, but you'll have life in the world to come. So with that, we'll start part 2. Okay? Okay, so Larry just asked a great question off camera, and I want to repeat it before we start the second part. So what exactly went, and Chaim asked the same question, what exactly went through Yishai's mind to think to change the halacha? That if Boaz says it was okay, why would Yishai have any doubts? Right? So one of the doubts is, didn't Boaz die right afterwards? If he died right afterwards, that might be a proof positive, or at least a sign that he was wrong. So that was actually asked this morning by one of my students, and I answered him what I thought was a good answer. Don't ask the question, why did he die right afterwards? How did he live so long? It could have been that his time to go was much earlier. but Hashem actually kept him around in order to impregnate her. But the question is valid, at least in Yishai's mind. If the man dies right afterwards, the next day, so it must have been proof positive that he was wrong. God punished him. Right? Okay, so let's start Parashat Nasso. And you'll find this in chapter 4 of Numbers. And I'll try to sum up the questions the Kli Yakar gives, because they're absolutely fascinating questions and leads us to really fascinating results, conclusions. If you notice, this is chapter 4, verse 21. Why in the world does a chapter, Naso, Parashat Nasso, start 21 verses later after, right? I mean, you would assume that
That's not a valid question, because chapters were introduced by the church.
This is exactly why I ask it, and that's going to be the answer. So people should know. Ever since in Europe, medieval Europe, we had things called disputations, where Judaism was put on trial. We always knew our verses through memory. We knew them by memory. And if someone would ask about a certain verse to another Jew, they would say in the third aliyah of this particular parsha, the third or fourth verse of that particular aliyah, because the aliyot, the parshiot, are divided into 7 different distinct portions. It would be quite easy. Even if you didn't say that, people knew the Torah by memory. But once Judaism was put on trial and there were disputations, in fact, you can look up the famous disputation, the Ramban, and a Jew who converted to Christianity. Anyway, you can look that up. So we were put on trial many times, and it became quite easy just to use their chapter and verse when having a discussion, because you're using it for communication. And when the printing press came around, of course, the Bible actually probably was and still is one of the best sellers. I don't know today, printing presses, but it's, at least online, it's probably the most looked up and accessed book ever. Yeah.
It's the number 1 bestseller. People buy it, put it on the shelf, and it's the number 1 book stolen.
Oh, also? Okay. So, anyway, that's why we're starting on verse 21, a little bit of the background. Now, and it's really interesting because Gershon is being counted. Guess what? All you have to do is look back a few sentences, and you see that Kahat was already counted. So, how do we know the order of who's the firstborn, who's the secondborn, who's the thirdborn? So even though in Parashat Nasso we're beginning with Gershon, he is the firstborn, and yet we already read and counted Kahat in the end of Bamidbar. So you start with Kahat, the counting of Kahat. In Parashat Nasso, you're starting with Gershon, who is the firstborn. Now, how do we know he's the firstborn? We're going out of order. It's very interesting. Look in chapter 3, verse 17. These were the sons of Levi by their names: Gershon, Kahat, and then Merari. So Gershon was actually the firstborn, and yet he's being counted second, even though he's being counted first in our parsha. He's being counted second altogether. All you have to do is, like I mentioned, you go back to the end of Bamidbar, where chapter 4 begins. Take the census of the sons of Kohat. That's how it begins. So the real question here is, well, he says it should have been, right? It makes sense that Gershon would have been counted first because he's the firstborn. So what exactly needs to be understood here? He explains that the Medrash explains part of it. And the Medrash begins by telling us that because the Holy Ark, the Ark of Testimony, that carried the Torah, was given over as a responsibility for carrying to Kahat. That's why Kahat is first. Because for the honor of the sake of the Holy Torah, for the sake of the Aron HaKodesh. But he says this also is a problem. If that's going to be your answer, Hagufya Kasha, that itself poses a problem. Because what he suggests is, well then why don't you just give Gershon the responsibility for carrying the ark, and then count him first. Don't put Kahat first because he's carrying the ark, and then Gershon, who's really the firstborn, second. Just switch the whole order. Put the responsibility for carrying the ark with Gershon, the firstborn, and then you got no problem. You count Gershon first. Okay. So the Kliyakar explains that what God really wants to teach you is that how important the Torah is. And how do you know that? Because if Gershon would have been, like we suggested, given the responsibility of carrying the Aron, and then they would have been counted first, you would have said the reason they were counted first is because they were the firstborn, not necessarily because they were carrying the Aron. That would have been your understanding, would have been mine. So he quotes a verse from Mishlei, that's Proverbs chapter 3 verse 35, which says, Kvod Chachamim Yinchalu, that the wise inherit honor. And the rest of the verse is, and fools generate disgrace. And what is all that? Kedei l'lamed dat et ha'am. This is all to get over this concept into the people's consciousness. Shechabdu es lomdei Torah, to honor those who learn the Torah and teach the Torah, and to call holiness for what it's worth, to recognize holiness for what it's worth. And this is the way that Kahat was counted first, on account of the fact that they carried the Word of God. That's what they did. They carried the Word of God. You know, when you see a Talmud Chacham, a sage, you say to yourself, this is a living Sefer Torah. This is a Torah scroll. It's alive. Whereas if the Aron HaKodesh, who carries the Torah, would have been given over to the firstborn, to Gershon, so I would have said it's on account of what? Shavur HaBachura Manatchila. It was only because they were the firstborn they were counted first. And then I would not have put importance on the Torah itself. This is a continuation we spoke about earlier, about the oral Torah being so significant and celebrating the Torah itself. So here it fits in so nice that this Parsha falls out this year, probably every other year as well, on Shavuot. Therefore, the Aron, the Holy Ark, was given over to Kahat. He should be counted first, in order that everyone should give honor to those who, to the Torah and those who learn it. Now this is where it really gets interesting, and I'll try to go slower now in the text. The Bala Medrash, right, in the Medrash itself, it brings down a very important verse that relates to this Parsha. Now we don't always see it until they draw it out for us. And this you'll find it's the same Proverbs, chapter 3, but it's verse 15. It's talking about the Torah. It's talking about wisdom. And it says that it's Yikarahi mipninim. It's more precious than pearls. That the Torah is more precious than pearls. Now we're going to focus on this one word. We know now that it's more chashiv, it's more important, it's more what? Than pearls. What is the word we're using for pearls? Right? Penina. Peninim. Pearls. From peninim. From pearls. It's more precious than pearls. Now this is how the Medrash describes it. This is what the Medrash wants to teach us by using this verse. That the Keter Torah, the word Keter again, it's 613 plus 7. The crown of Torah is available to everyone. It's not just to an individual, but it's to the whole nation, number one. And more than that, the king, as we just described, King David represents unbelievable crown, right? It's also the heart of the nation, and it's the heart of the world. Moshiach is the heart. That's why I mentioned in the last segment about all these intricate relationships. It's so that we really understand that the Moshiach is actually able to relate to all mankind. I heard this in the name of Yochanan Zweig, that I don't know what you want to call them, because they're risque, right? Those relationships that happen with Lot and his two daughters, and Yehuda and Tamar. There's some risque parts to these relationships. Even Boaz and Ruth, right? As you may have noticed, right? And now we talked about Yishai a little bit with his wife, and he was silent. That the Mashiach is going to be able to relate not just to the Jewish nation, but his soul relates to the entire mankind. As we said, the word Adam. Adam will relate to every human being on the planet, which at this present moment, it's around 8 billion. Right? So, first of all, it says the Keter Torah is Hefker, Nicole. Hefker means it's available. It's not owned by any individual. It's available for everyone to make an acquisition on. So, that's why the Torah, the Aron, the Kodesh, the Holy Ark, was not given to the firstborn, because shelo yeh tifarato, so that we don't blow up his ego and his self-glorification and arrogance by saying, Ani rui leketer Torah yeter mezulato, that I'm more fit to carry the Aron, or I get a special place in Torah more than anybody else because I was the firstborn. And this is something I think every Jew should understand. We are called God's firstborn. Yes, we do have a special place, but it's our job to give it over. That's our responsibility in a responsible way. Okay? We have to be responsible how we give over the Torah to the rest of the world. But it's our job. It doesn't belong only to us. Think about that. That if it was given to the Bechor would say, I must be higher and mighty than everyone else. No, El HaKol Shavim Bo. Everyone is equal in it. Everyone has an opportunity for the Torah. And that's why it says, Yikara hi mipninim. This is what the Medrash is saying, that verse. It's more precious than pearls. Now we don't understand that. At the very end, we will understand what it means by the Bechor. But in the meantime, what about a Kohen Gadol? A Kohen. The Kohanim. The Kohen Gadol goes into the most innermost chambers. What's it called in Hebrew? There's two different ways to refer to it. As Kodesh HaKadoshim, Holy of Holies, or the innermost chamber. And how would you say that? Lifnai ulifnim. So now we understand that word mipninim is a play on the word. Lifnai ulifnim. Right? If you adjust your ear to hearing these words, Lifnai ulifnim, mipninim. It's more precious than the Kohen Gadol who goes in only once a year into the Holy of Holies. It's more precious than let me preface this. There are three crowns, right? There's the crown of Torah, there's the crown of Kahuna, and the crown of kingship. How do we know that? There are three vessels in the tabernacle that have a zar, a crown. And the Medrash explains that these represent the three crowns. The one on the incense altar, that crown represents kahuna, the priesthood. The crown on the bread, on the table of breads, that represents malchut. By the way, since we're on the subject, King David was born in Bethlehem. What's the reason the king, the Moshiach, has to be born in Bethlehem? And when we say born in Bethlehem, we're talking about David only. The Moshiach today is through David, who was born in Bethlehem. He doesn't have to be born in Bethlehem. Okay, so for those Christians out there that want to read the whole thing very wrong, I just want to correct that for you. It was David who was born in Bethlehem. Why does kingship have to come from Bethlehem? Because it means Beit Lechem, the king, like the president of the United States, or the president of Brazil, or Mexico. The president, the king, he's responsible to make sure that everyone's fed, right? As we know in the Gemara, that says the people used to come every morning to King David and say, "Give us parnasa, help us make money. What should we do?" That's the role of the government. That's the role of the king, right? To provide welfare and assistance. And if they don't, they're not doing their job. Okay, you heard that from me. So that's a little bit of a stickler for today with the corona thing that's going on. But Peninim is talking about the Kohen Gadol, who's Niknas Lifnei Lifnim. He goes in once a year into the most innermost chambers. Ki Keter Kahuna, the way to get the crown of priesthood is only through the seed of Aaron. But when it comes to Torah, it's available to everyone. It's Hefker L'Kol. Everyone has a chance to merit in it. What about, okay, that's why it says, Yikar hi mipnim. And you know why? Because of Keter Malchut, the actual crown of the king. What happens? I mean, I haven't seen a real crown. I've only seen pictures, museums, TV, right? The queen. They're jewels. They're very, what do they call?
Crown jewels.
Crown jewels, there you go. Right? Precious gems, right? So it's more precious than pearls, then even more precious. The Torah is more precious than Keter Malchut. Sheyesh lo zahav harav pninim. It's made of gold and has lots of gems. But guess what? Only if you're from the seed of David can you become the king. But when it comes to Keter Torah, the Keter of Torah, hakol zochin, everybody can merit. And now we're talking about the Bachur, because that's how we started off. In Ruth, just imagine, in Ruth, there's a verse that says, Zos lefanim b'Yisrael, in chapter 4, verse 7, when it's talking about the Livrite marriage, right? The Yibum, the Livrite marriage, that this is something that is from former days. This is something that went on within our people for many generations since we left Egypt. So the words are Zos lefanim b'Yisrael. This was first. This was early. It's so what? Like you're standing in line. Who? How do you tell someone else you're first? Ani lefanecha, or right? You're saying I'm first. So the word first. So what's firstborn is the firstborn. That's what the word here lefanim. So going back to when it says Yikar. Yikarahi mitninim. It's even more precious than pearls. It's even more precious than the firstborn. So we see that the Torah is more precious than the Kohen Gadol, meaning lifnai lifnim, mipninim. It's more precious than the malchut and the kingship that represents by the pninim of the crown, and even more precious than the bachor, who is lifanai, which is first. Ki el bachor ein zocha ki im mi shenoled rishona. The only merit you have to be a firstborn is if you were actually firstborn. Aval Torah hakol zochin. But the Torah is available to everyone. So I want to end the Shavuos. Just know that it's there for you to take. Take advantage. It's there. Find time, right? Find time on Shavuos especially. But after Shavuos, it's a celebration of the Torah. This is when the nation was born, right? It's true. We left Egypt. It seems like we were really born. We went through the canal, and the waters broke, right? But what was the purpose of coming out into this world? Was as we're counting, we're almost finished counting, towards receiving the Torah, right? The 48 ways. You'll find this in Mishnah and Pirkei Avot, chapter 6, Mishnah 6. There are 48 ways to acquire the Torah. This is what we should have been doing during the Sfirah, counting and going through the different processes and changes and character traits in our life to acquire the Torah. But it's never ending. Start over. Or if you haven't started, start now. Right? This is the time for change. Right? You want to put the corona back in its place. That's my suggestion. Let's finish this thing. Let's put it back in its place. We're talking metaphysically here. I'm not a doctor. I'm not an epidemiologist. I'm not a virologist. I'm none of those things. I'm a metaphysicist. I have a doctorate in metaphysics. And that's all I can tell you. Let's put the corona, let's put the crown, the Keter Torah, back in its place. Jews out there, there's 613, right? Principles, basically. 613 paths to have an intimate relationship with your Creator. And for the non-Jews, there's 7 overall principles, and I give a series beyond the 7. I suggest you listen to them. I'll put the link down below so you can get more information about that. With that, Hag Sameach, enjoy your cheesecake, but most of all, like we talked about, it's milk, it's the chalavi, it's the fact that a tinok, a child, it sounds a little bit risque here, when he sucks his mother's breast, he's getting a new taste. We're going to bring a mincha chadashah. We're going to bring a brand new offering on Shavuos. And therefore the mincha chadashah is to remind us to make chidushim, to learn Torah as if it's new. Every time it should taste just like you've never had this before. And I wish that upon everybody this coming year. So first of all, Hag Sameach, Shabbat Shalom, enjoy Kol Tuv. Have a great life and welcome home to Torah.